Hello and welcome to part 11 of our Azure Solutions Architect Expert exam practice question series. We are starting with question number 79. You need to recommend a solution to integrate Azure Cosmos DB and Azure Synapse. The solution must meet the following requirements. Traffic from an Azure Synapse workspace to the Azure Cosmos DB account must be sent via the Microsoft Backbone network. Traffic from the Azure Synapse workspace to the Azure Cosmos DB account must not be routed over the internet. Implementation effort must be minimized. What should you include in the recommendation? The first part of the question is talking about when provisioning the Azure Synapse workspace, your options are configure a dedicated managed virtual network, disable public network access to the workspace endpoints, enable the use of Entra ID authentication. Folks, you should provision the Azure Synapse workspace with the option to configure a dedicated managed virtual network. This will ensure that the traffic between Azure Synapse and Azure Cosmos DB is routed through the Microsoft Backbone network and not over the internet. Now, the second part of the question is talking about when configuring the Azure Cosmos DB account, enable, and your options are managed private endpoints, server level firewall rules, service endpoint policies. Folks, you should configure the Azure Cosmos DB account to use managed private endpoints. This will allow Azure Synapse to securely connect to Azure Cosmos DB using a private link. Next question. You have an on-premise data center named Site 1. Site 1 contains a VMware vSphere cluster named Cluster 1 that hosts 100 virtual machines. Cluster 1 is managed by using VMware vCenter. You have an Azure subscription named Sub 1. You plan to migrate the virtual machines from Cluster 1 to Sub 1. You need to identify which resources are required to run the virtual machines in Azure. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you configure? Now, in terms of resources, your options are an Azure Migrate appliance, an Azure Migrate project, an Azure VMware Solution Private Cloud, an Azure VMware Solution Host. Now you need to tell which of these resources should be created in subscription 1 and which of them should be created in cluster 1. Folks, you should deploy an Azure Migrate project in sub 1. This is the project within Azure Migrate where the collected data and migration processes are managed. It helps you track the progress of the migration, assess compatibility, and prepare for moving workloads to Azure. You need to use the Azure Migrate appliance to discover and assess the VMs on cluster 1. This appliance is required for discovery and assessment of on-premise VMware environment. It collects data from VMware environment and sends it to Azure Migrate to help understand which resources are required in Azure. So folks, I hope you now understand why I have chosen an Azure Migrate project needs to be created in subscription 1 and an Azure Migrate appliance needs to be created in cluster 1. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comments section. Question number 81. You need to recommend a solution to generate a monthly report of all the new Azure Resource Manager resource deployments in your subscription. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are Azure Log Analytics, Azure Arc, Azure Analysis Services, Azure Monitor Action Groups. Now, the recommended solution in this case is Azure Log Analytics, which is a service within Azure Monitor that collects and analyzes log data from various Azure resources. It allows you to query the activity logs and extract details about ARM deployments. By leveraging Azure Log Analytics, you can set up a query that filters out the resource deployment events and generates a monthly report. There is a link on your screen. Go through the link to understand more about Azure Log Analytics. Next question. You have an Azure subscription that contains the resources shown in the following table. You basically have 5 resources. The first one is named as contoso.com and it is Azure private DNS zone. Then you have 3 virtual networks with the name of VNet1, VNet2, and VNet3. VNet1 is linked to contoso.com and paired with VNet2. VNet2 is also linked to contoso.com and paired with VNet1. VNet3 is also linked to contoso.com and isolated from VNet1 and VNet2. Then you have a log analytics workspace named workspace1, which is used to store logs collected from virtual machines on all the virtual networks. VNet1, VNet2, and VNet3 each has multiple virtual machines connected. The virtual machines use the Azure DNS service for name resolution. You need to recommend an Azure Monitor log routing solution that meets the following requirements. Ensure that the logs collected from the virtual machines and sent to Workspace ONE are routed over the Microsoft Backbone network. Minimize administrative effort. What should you include in the recommendation? Now, the first part of the question is talking about minimum number of Azure Monitor private link scope objects, AMPLS. Your options are 1, 2, and 3. Folks, you can use a single AMPLS to connect multiple VNets to a log analytics workspace. This minimizes administrative overhead. Now, the next part of the question talks about minimum number of private endpoints. Again, your options are 1, 2, or 3. You will need a total of 2 private endpoints, 1 private endpoint for VNet1 and VNet2 since they are paired, and 1 private endpoint for VNet3 since it is an isolated one. Next question, friends. You have 100 Azure storage accounts. Access to the accounts is restricted by using Azure role-based access control assignments. You need to recommend a solution that uses role assignment conditions based on the tags assigned to individual resources within the storage accounts. What should you include in the recommendation? The first part of the question is talking about implement role assignment conditions by using. Your options are access control lists, attribute-based access control, shared access signatures. The correct answer here is attribute-based access control, which is also called as ABAC, which is an authorization model that allows you to assign roles with conditions based on attributes of the resources or users, such as tags on Azure resources. ACLs are typically used for managing access at a more granular level, such as file or folder permissions within Azure files or blob storage. They are not used for setting access conditions based on tags or attributes. Now, SaaS provides delegated time-limited access to specific resources in your Azure storage account. However, it is not used for setting access policies based on attributes like tags. The next part of the question is talking about assign permissions to, and your options are blobs, files, or tables. The most common use case for granular access control is typically blobs. So I will choose blobs as the correct choice here. Folks, refer to the link on your screen to understand some examples of how to achieve this solution practically. Question number 84. You need to design a solution that will execute custom C# code in response to an event routed to Azure Event Grid. The solution must meet the following requirements. The executed code must be able to access the private IP address of a Microsoft SQL Server instance that runs on an Azure virtual machine. Costs must be minimized. What should you include in the solution? Your options are Azure Logic Apps in the consumption plan, Azure Functions in the premium plan, Azure Functions in the consumption plan, Azure Logic Apps in the integrated service environment. Folks, first thing to take into consideration is the need to run custom C# code. So you can rule out any options containing Azure Logic Apps, as Logic Apps are not designed to run custom code. Logic Apps are a low-code or no-code service designed to orchestrate workflows using built-in connectors and actions. This leaves us with both the options related to Azure Functions. Now, folks, the first requirement is to access the private IP address of SQL Server instance that runs on the Azure virtual machines, which means they are referring to utilizing the virtual network integration feature, which is not available in the consumption plan. This leaves us with option B, which is Azure functions in the premium plan as the right answer. As always, folks, there is a link on your screen for you to review more details about the Azure functions premium plan. Question number 85. You plan to deploy 10 applications to Azure. The applications will be deployed to two Azure Kubernetes clusters, which is AKS clusters. Each cluster will be deployed to a separate Azure region. The application deployment must meet the following requirements. Ensure that the applications remain available if a single AKS cluster fails. Ensure that the connection traffic over the internet is encrypted by using SSL without having to configure SSL on each container. Which service should you include in the recommendation? Your options are Azure Front Door, Azure Traffic Manager, AKS Ingress Controller, Azure Load Balancer. Now, friends, Azure Front Door would be the appropriate choice in this use case. Let's understand the reason that helped in eliminating other options. Azure Traffic Manager is a DNS-based load balancer, but it operates at the DNS level, not at the application layer, which is what we need here. AKS Ingress Controller does not handle traffic distribution between regions. You would need to manage separate ingress controllers for each cluster and use another service like Traffic Manager for multi-region failover. Now, Azure Load Balancer operates at layer 4. It is designed for regional load balancing and cannot route traffic across different regions. So folks, I hope you now understand why I have chosen Azure Front Door as the correct choice here. Question number 86. You have 5 Azure subscriptions. Each subscription is linked to a separate Entra ID tenant and contains virtual machines that run Windows Server 2022. You plan to collect Windows security events from the virtual machines and send them to a single log analytics workspace. You need to recommend a solution that meets the following requirements: collects event logs from multiple subscriptions, supports the use of data collection rules, which is DCRs, to define which events to collect. What should you recommend for each requirement? The first part of the question is talking about the requirement to collect the event logs. And your options are Azure Event Grid, Azure Lighthouse, Azure Purview. Folks, with Azure Lighthouse, you can gain cross-tenant management capabilities, allowing you to collect data from VMs across different subscriptions and tenants into a single log analytics workspace. This is the reason why we have chosen Azure Lighthouse as the correct answer. Now, the next part of the question is talking about what you need to do to support the DCRs. And your options are the Log Analytics Agent, the Azure Monitor Agent, the Azure Connected Machine Agent. Now, friends, DCRs are a part of Azure Monitor and are used to define the data you want to collect and send to a Log Analytics workspace. Using Azure Monitor combined with Azure Lighthouse, you can define DCRs that span across multiple subscriptions managed through Lighthouse. So folks, Azure Monitor Agent is the recommended agent for new deployments because it is only agent that supports DCRs. Next question. You have an Azure subscription that contains multiple storage accounts. You assign Azure policy definitions to these storage accounts. You need to recommend a solution to meet the following requirements: trigger on-demand Azure policy compliance scans, raise Azure Monitor non-compliance alerts by querying logs collected by Log Analytics. What should you recommend for each requirement? The first requirement is to trigger the compliance scans. Your options are an Azure template, the Azure command line interface, the Azure portal. Folks, you should use Azure command line interface to trigger on-demand compliance scans. An evaluation scan for a subscription or a resource group can be started with Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, a call to the REST API, or by using the Azure Policy Compliance Scan GitHub action. This scan is an asynchronous process. So folks, instead of Azure CLI if you had Azure PowerShell or a call to the REST API or even Azure policy compliance scan GitHub action in the option, those would have also been the correct choice. Now, the next part of the question is talking about what should you include in the recommendation to generate the non-compliance alerts. Configure diagnostic settings for your options are Azure Activity Logs, Log Analytics Workspace, Storage Account. You should configure diagnostic settings for the Azure Activity Logs. By configuring diagnostic settings for Azure Activity Logs, you can send this data to a Log Analytics workspace. This enables you to query non-compliance events and create alerts in Azure Monitor. So folks, we have almost 90 questions in the AZ-305 exam practice question series. So if you are someone who is looking to gain PDF access to all the questions that we have covered in the series till now, then do not forget to take the gold membership of the channel and just email us at devopshub2023@gmail.com requesting your PDF copy. We do have one-time payment options as well. So if you are someone who doesn't want to take membership, you can again reach out to us at devopshub2023@gmail.com requesting further information about the one-time payment options. Question number 88. You need to recommend an Azure storage solution that meets the following requirements. The storage must support 1 petabyte of data. The data must be stored in blob storage. The storage must support 3 levels of subfolders. The storage must support access control lists. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are a premium storage account that is configured for block blobs, a general purpose V2 storage account that has hierarchical namespace enabled, a premium storage account that is configured for page blobs, a premium storage account that is configured for file shares and supports large file shares. Now, one of the requirements is that we require access control lists, which requires either block blob storage or general purpose V2, so we can rule out option C and option D. Now, other requirement is to support 3 levels of subfolders, which means we need hierarchical namespace enabled, which is only supported by general purpose V2 storage account. With hierarchical namespace enabled, the storage account behaves like Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, which supports access control lists as well, which is another requirement. So folks, that's all for this part of the series. If you have liked the content, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe our channel. We will be back soon with more such questions in our Azure Solutions Architect Expert Exam Practice Question series.